Hello, good people. So, in my last introduction video where I talked about my desire to share my endometriosis story with you, I promised to bring you another video where I go into a little bit more detail. And I'm hoping to make it a bit more palatable, to break it down into maybe 3 segments: pre-diagnosis, post-diagnosis, and living with the condition. And it's interesting, as I've been putting this video together in the last few days, few weeks, it's been all over the news, the fact that it's the 50th anniversary when we put man on the moon. And of course, that's an amazing thing. It's no mean feat to be able to accomplish something like that. And I hear most of you asking, so what's that got to do with endometriosis? Well, as I say, it's an amazing accomplishment. It's fantastic to see how capable mankind truly is to be able to move from one planetary body to another. So on the one hand, it fills me with excitement and wonderment, but on the other hand, it also fills me with despair and sadness, because here we are in the 21st century and we have an illness such as endometriosis, and we don't, one, know what causes it. There's a lot of conjecture out there. If you go online and research endometriosis, there'll be a whole host of supposed reasons as to why the condition might come about. It could be genetic, it could be dietary, lifestyle, etc., etc., but we don't really have any concrete reason. And that brings me on to the second point. If we don't have a reason and we don't know how the condition comes about, then how are we going to cure it? So we don't know what causes it, and we don't have a cure for endometriosis in this 21st century. Now, there's something not quite right about that. Surely if we can put man on the moon, surely we can get some guys into a lab to find out and work out what causes this illness and what can be done about it. So anyway, after my last video, I reflected on what it took to get me to this point where I'm now able to talk openly about my health condition. And honestly speaking, I thank God that I am at this point now where I'm able to actually sit here and share, because for a long time I was driven by the desire to be a voice for the voiceless. And I guess, well, 2 things really. One, I am just incredibly grateful and thankful to God that He has brought me from such a long way, wherein there was a time when this was a very dark, lonely spot that I occupied. It was very isolating, because one of the reasons why I'm doing this is there weren't forums or places, known places where I could just go and get information, or find a shoulder to cry on, or exchange notes with another woman who's going through the same thing, to work out how you get through this thing, how do you slay this beast. And it's incredibly emotionally challenging to relive those dark memories. And I'm not saying this to elicit sympathy. I say it simply to make the point that it's quite something, for me it is, to look back and remember how painful it was physically. I can, if I sit down and try to envisage, I can almost feel that pain, relive the pain all over again. What it was like to not be able to get out of bed, what it was like to not be able to move literally from point A to point B, and point A to point B could be a matter of feet. So from my sofa to my kitchen to just make myself a hot cup of tea to get some relief, doing that was a problem. Or if I managed to do it, it would take me an age to gingerly make my way from my living room to my kitchen. um, living a life of having to be on painkillers for years, for decades. That was a long time. Living a life where it was all about going in and out of the hospital. There was a time when my life was all about consultation meetings with my doctors, my consultants, scans, tests, waiting for results, more consultation meetings, scans, tests, waiting for results. This carried on for a very long time. I wasn't able to work for a very long time. And so when I look back and think that this was all down to just one condition, and it had such a huge impact on my life, I thank God that I've come out of the other end, and that I'm able to actually sit down here now and share with you. And although it's still a journey and I'm still living with the condition, but I am so much better now. And I not only want to share, I also want to bring hope. Which brings me neatly on to my next point, because my intention was to create a platform where I am able to empower, I'm able to share, I'm able to connect, I'm able to inform, and I'm able to engage, which is a nice little acronym, ESCIE, ESCIE. So I think from now on, I'll call it Simone's ESCIE or Simi's ESCIE, Simone's ESCIE platform. And when I refer to it, just so that acronym will ring a bell, and you know it's about empowering, it's about sharing, it's about connecting, informing, and engaging. Because as I said in my last video, I think it's crucial that we're able to be transparent, not to the point where you're necessarily bearing all, but just being able to talk, because that was a very lonely, dark corner that I occupied. And I know it would have helped me immensely to know that I wasn't some kind of freak when I was going through this, particularly during this pre-diagnosis stage where I would suffer incessant pain for days on end just because I was on my period. And I remember I'd check with my girlfriends and ask them, do you get this kind of pain? Do you bleed heavily? Do you end up leaking and, soiling your clothes and, from the uncontrollable bleeding? And a lot of my girlfriends, bless them, didn't even know that they'd started their periods. It was a rather uneventful time of their life. It was just a minor inconvenience. And I used to think, wow, my life is anything but uneventful when it comes to periods. Periods for me spelt drama and misery and pain for a long time. And as I said, but for His grace, I don't think I'd be here on a number of levels, to have beat it, to have been able to develop the mindset of, yes, this is a condition that I happen to have. It's a spot in my life that I happen to find myself in, but it is not my lot. It's just the valley that I'm going through, and I have come through the worst of that valley, and now feel fit and able and am pleased to be able to share with you. So, pre-diagnosis, I remember actually with excitement when I started my period. I must have been around 11 or 12, and there was a lot of anticipation on my part, because prior to that, I was just a little girl. And as most of you, I'm sure, remember, when you're a child, you feel like you're not being taken seriously, and you can't wait to become an adult. And when you start your period, you become, a woman, and you have in your head this idea that people will start to take you seriously. Plus, for me, I was a skinny little girl when I was growing up. Some of my friends and family will attest to that. And in my head, again, I had this notion that once you become a woman, you start to look like a woman. I'll, start to fill out and develop, shall we say, in areas where women develop a nice, pretty posterior, and other lumps and bumps where they should be. And I couldn't wait for this to happen. I was so excited. I remember it so vividly. And I was able to relate to my mother, for instance, who was going through the same thing on a certain level. It was no longer, now mother, adult, and dealing with child. No, I was no longer a child. I was now a woman. And I remember I was also really excited to be able to empathize with my friends who were going through the same thing, and would jointly bemoan the fact that, we now had this unwanted monthly visitor, which meant we now had to find sanitary towels and, deal with the fact that we couldn't go for PE lessons or go out with our friends and party. And yes, I guess that was the height of my, shall we say, inconvenience, and what I thought was, oh gosh, this is terrible. I've now got my period, and what am I going to do? I have to go for a few days of not being able to, go out and do my favourite things. Well, little did I know that that was actually the least of my problems, and that life was about to take a whole different turn in the years to come. And it was quite an interesting one, because as the time went on, it slowly dawned on me that my periods were not the same as my girlfriends who I was comparing notes with at the time, and that something made me stand out, and something made me realize that there was something wrong, that it wasn't normal to be having this kind of pain, but yet when I went to seek help from the professionals, i.e. the doctors, they didn't know what was wrong. So I was misdiagnosed, meaning I was fobbed off. I was told that, oh, it's nothing. Period pains sometimes can be painful. So sorry, when you have your period, it can sometimes be painful. So, if you just take some medication, you should be fine. Or they completely misdiagnose the condition with some other way out illness. Urinary infection was one of them that sprang to mind, which I was told I had. Doctors suspected that this was what was going on when they couldn't have been further from the facts. So I thought at this stage, maybe just to give a bit of background, for those who may or may not be familiar with the term endometriosis, I thought I would get the definition from the NHS's website and just read it to you, just to give you an idea. Endometriosis is a condition where tissue similar to the lining of the womb starts to grow in other places, such as the ovaries and the fallopian tubes. Endometriosis can affect women of any age, but it's common in women in their 30s and 40s. It's a long-term condition that can have a significant impact on your life, but there are treatments that can help. At this stage, just a quick caveat, and that's just to say, do forgive any terms or terminology that I may use that may offend some of your sensibilities. It's an illness, and there are times I may have to use language that may take some of you, aback slightly, or may catch you unawares. But I don't want to sugarcoat. No airs and graces. I just want to give it to you like it is, so you get the real deal. So, symptoms of endometriosis. The symptoms can vary. Some women are badly affected, while others may not have any noticeable symptoms. But the main symptoms are pain in your lower tummy or your back. That's a pelvic pain. Usually worse during your period, meaning that sometimes you might just have that pain constantly, or you find that it gets worse during your period. Period pain that stops you doing your normal activities. Pain during and after sex. Pain when peeing or opening your bowels during your period. Feeling sick, constipation, diarrhea, blood in your pee during your period. Difficulty getting pregnant. You may also have heavy periods. You might have to use a lot of pads or tampons, or you may bleed through your clothes. For some women, endometriosis can have a big impact on their life, and may sometimes lead to feelings of depression. By the way, I've suffered with all of the above and a good few more. It goes on to say when to see your GP. See your GP if symptoms of endometriosis, especially if they're having a big impact on your life. It may help to write down your symptoms, and it just gives advice on what you can do to try and help that consultation with your doctor. The doctors may recommend treatment if they think you have endometriosis. If these don't help, they might refer you to a specialist. Might. Note that word. They might refer you to a specialist called a gynecologist for some further tests, such as an ultrasound scan or laparoscopy. A laparoscopy, for those of you who may not know, is where a surgeon passes a thin tube through a small cut in your tummy so that they can see any patches of endometriosis tissue. The only way to be certain that you have endometriosis is to have a laparoscopy, and that's something I can vouch for. So that's a working definition. I mean, there's so much more to endometriosis. It talks about it spreading to some of those vital organs in your abdomen, your ovaries, your fallopian tubes. In my case, it spread to my bowels, it was on my ovaries. I have heard cases in other women where it spreads to your lungs, and I've even heard of cases where it spreads to the brain. So this is, it's an all-invasive condition, and it can have far-reaching consequences. However, commonly what you will find is that it will usually affect the abdominal area, and so when you have your period, it's very easy then for doctors to mistake it, to get confused, to misdiagnose, and assume hastily that it's merely period pains, and would usually just try and fob you off with, oh, why don't you try taking some paracetamol? This should help you. Paracetamol. Guys, when I was at the height of my pain and discomfort on my worst days, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on, most likely in subsequent videos, there was a time when I had to be rushed into A&E because I'd gotten to a point where the endometriosis, the pain from it was constant, it was relentless, it was acute, and it was chronic. It was all of the above and more. And the only pain relief that would work was morphine. Now, obviously, morphine is not the kind of pain relief that you can stay on permanently. So I could only be on it for short periods of time. And then, of course, once the effects wore off, the pain would come back. So that was a whole, other cycle that I had to deal with while in hospital. Ultimately the reason why they would put the patient, i.e. myself, on pain relieving medication is to just ensure that you're comfortable and it affords them that vital period of time to send you off for scans, because I can't be going under equipment while I'm writhing about in pain. So of course they'd need to get me comfortable and stable so that they're able to conduct their test to see what was going on. Now, this kind of pain was regular for me, at least on a monthly basis, at least. It happened throughout my school years, throughout my college years. And it was when it started happening at university that things took a different turn. I remember right at the start of my degree course, there was in my lecture theatre, and you can imagine it's an exciting time for anyone, and I just wanted to be a student, to get on with life, to study, to learn, and to have some fun. And I remember one day I was on my period. I must have taken some painkillers. And here's the thing about endometriosis: when you take the painkillers, it's amazing. What I found for me was it brought about a certain amnesia, because when you get that relief from the painkillers, in other words, the pain subsides and you can now start getting on with life. Because if you imagine when the pain hits, life comes to a grinding halt. Literally, you can't do anything because it's so debilitating and it's so excruciating, and moving about makes it so much worse. So you literally cannot do a thing other than just lie down still, preferably with a hot water bottle and lots of hot drinks. In fact, an incessant flow of hot drinks was what used to get me through most of those days. So when you take the painkillers and you get this relief, I used to find I'd actually forget, and I'll be lulled into this false sense of security, thinking, finally, I feel okay now, I can get on with life. And I'd literally then start running around and just carrying on as normal, not realizing that the painkillers only last for a short period, usually a few hours, because then you have to take some more. And it took me a while to get into that rhythm, into that cycle of having to take painkillers every 3-4 hours, every 3-4 hours. And the doctors would advise that you keep yourself topped up with the painkillers in your system to ensure that the pain doesn't overcome you. It took me a while to get to that point. So here I was at my university in the lecture hall, having completely forgotten. I was just oblivious to the fact that the pain killing relief was going to wear off. And it started to come back while I was in the middle of my lecture. And it's usually very spasmodic. So it comes and it goes, comes and it goes. And each time it comes with increasing intensity, to the point where it got so intense I started to feel nauseous. And that's when I realised I needed to get out. So I remember rushing out of the hall and finding the nearest courtyard and being violently sick. I threw up. University, a freshman, first year, it was probably the first few weeks. And I'm sure there must have been other students walking around thinking, she must have been on the razzle the night before, can't handle her drink. If only. But no, this was as a result of endometriosis. So, of course, I thought to myself, I can't be having this. I got myself straight off to my doctors, and my intention was to try and get to the bottom of what was causing this recurring pain every single month, try to get some answers. And I clearly remember the consultation, first of all, lasted no more than 2 or 3 minutes. I clearly remember that. And the doctor barely asked me any relevant or pertinent questions about my history, for instance. How often I've had the pain? Is there anything I do or do not do that may be causing it? Maybe find out how I manage it. Maybe send me for scans, for a test, send me to a specialist. There was none of that. Instead, what he did was he promptly put me on the pill. Bearing in mind that I did not go in there asking to be put on the pill, I simply wanted to get some answers to why I was suffering like this. And this suffering had gone on for years and years and years, to the point where I was now at my wit's end. Here I was embarking on a new life as a university student, just wanting to get on with my studies and to be good at it. And I found this thing was holding me back and was threatening to blight my uni years, indeed my life. But of course I was young and immature then, and I accepted the pill, and I went on it, even though I wasn't actually wanting to be on the pill. And I was lulled into a false sense of security because, of course, the pill did everything it was meant to. It did what it said on the tin. It stopped my period and thereby stopped the pain. But it's an artificial stopping of your period, as some of you may know. And looking back now, I think one of the reasons why in years to come the pain became increasingly unbearable is that all the while I was on that pill, the endometriosis was getting worse, because it's a degenerative illness. So the growths, the adhesions, the tumours from the endometriosis were just spreading and spreading and spreading. So they were taking hold at the back of my womb, they were taking hold on my bowels, they were taking hold on my ovaries, and various other sides of my abdomen. And I carried on through life blithely oblivious to what was going on. And it wasn't until many years later that I would realize that the pill didn't really stop the silent degeneration of my body within, and that things would start to function properly, and that the condition was well and truly taking hold. And it wasn't until several years later that I would realize just how bad things had become when I collapsed in the pain during what should have been a happy period of my life. I ended up being rushed to accidental emergency, screaming and shouting in pain. It was pretty unbearable. It was pretty scary, not knowing what was going on, why my body was not doing what I wanted it to do. And yeah, it's a period that I look back on now that is quite difficult to relive, because with a bit of knowledge and being able to equip yourself with the right tools, I think it could have been prevented. In fact, I know it could have been prevented. And this is all part of the story that I want to share with you. So I will leave it there for now. Apologies for this video being so much longer than I planned for it to be. You try and plan what you're going to say, so I may write a little bit about this and then, just try and speak to camera and just have a free-flowing conversation with you. But of course, as I recall things, I want to share, because I'm trying to give you the real deal and to help you become part of my journey as it was then. But more importantly, I'm hoping that I haven't depressed any of you into thinking, what a horrible thing this must be. There is light at the end of the tunnel, which is why I'm sitting here in front of you today, able to share my story. And I will share the highs and the lows, and some of the things that I used, some of the tools that I equipped myself with, and the things that I did that helped me come through the other side. It's still a journey. I am still walking the path, and yeah, there is light at the end of that tunnel. Just hold on to that thought, guys. So until the next time, I'm going to go off and work on some more content, which I hope to bring you very soon. So keep your eyes peeled, watch this space. But until the next time, do feel free to come back to me with comments. And thank you so much to all those of you who have shared very, very positive, favourable feedback with me on the last video. It means an awful lot. It really does. As I mentioned before, it wasn't very easy to get to this stage where I'm sharing what was a very difficult part of my life with you, but I just feel compelled to do so. And so it's encouraging to know that it's making a difference to one or two or several people out there, be it whether it affects you directly or indirectly. It doesn't matter, just to be able to create a dialogue, to generate awareness, and, as I say, to be able to empower and create a forum where we're engaging is my intention. And when I get the feedback, the shares, or people say to me that yes, that helped me, or it gives me hope, or I didn't realise that I could do X, Y, and Z, that makes me feel good, and it makes me feel that, okay, all was not lost. So until the next time, look after yourselves, and I shall see you soon.